The following program is an in-depth analytical documentary intended for a mature audience and aims to be educational. The subject matter may be disturbing or triggering for some viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Controversial Crimes. Before we dive into today's case, just a quick reminder, if you're passionate about in-depth crime analysis and thought-provoking discussions, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. If you enjoy the content, a like and share would really help support the channel. Now let's jump right in. Every day, millions of families wake to the same ordinary routines. Breakfast tables, school mornings, plans for the future, life unfolding exactly as expected. But sometimes, behind that ordinary life, something begins to change. Not suddenly, not violently, but gradually. A shift in perception, a fracture in identity, a private reality forming beneath a public one. In August of 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, a family disappeared. A mother, 2 children, no signs of a struggle, no immediate explanation. 16 years earlier, in Modesto, California, another woman vanished. Lacey Peterson, 8 months pregnant. Her husband would later be convicted of her murder and the death of their unborn son. 2 families, 2 states, years apart. Different lives. The same unsettling question. How does someone destroy the people closest to them? Criminologists have a term for cases like this. Family annihilation. One of the rarest and most disturbing forms of violence. When a partner or parent eliminates their own family. These offenders are often described the same way: quiet, normal, ordinary, which forces us to ask, what changes? Family annihilation refers to the killing of a spouse, children, or entire family unit by a parent or intimate partner. It is statistically rare, yet across decades and across countries, the pattern repeats. Most perpetrators are male. Many have no prior violent criminal history. Most appear stable before the crime. That stability is part of what makes these cases so disturbing, because it creates the illusion that nothing was wrong. But forensic psychology suggests something else. These crimes are rarely impulsive explosions of rage. They are more often the result of internal psychological progression, a progression shaped by identity, shame, control, and perceived collapse. For some offenders, the family becomes deeply entwined with self-image. Provider, protector, successful adult, devoted partner. When that identity fractures, the crisis is not merely situational, it is existential. Researchers have identified 4 broad categories of family annihilators. The self-righteous type externalizes blame. They see their partner as responsible for their suffering. Violence becomes punishment. The anomic type ties identity to success and status. When economic collapse occurs, identity collapses with it. The disappointed type believes their family has failed to meet rigid expectations. Violence becomes distorted correction. The paranoid type believes external threats justify extreme protection. Not every case fits perfectly into one category, but across all types, one psychological theme persists: control. Control over identity, control over narrative, control over how the story ends. Financial stress alone does not cause violence. Relationship strain alone does not cause violence. What matters is how these stresses interact with identity. When self-worth is built entirely on external roles, any threat to those roles can feel like annihilation of the self. Psychologists distinguish guilt from shame. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. Shame is destabilizing because it targets identity, not behavior. For some individuals, shame becomes intolerable. An intolerable shame demands escape. Before violence, there is often division, a split between the public self and the private self. This is not simply deception, it is compartmentalization. The individual begins constructing an alternative identity, a new future, a different partner, a life without current obligations. The family becomes psychologically distant. The alternative life becomes psychologically real. Over time, the two realities cannot coexist comfortably, and one must be eliminated. Family annihilation often follows a recognizable progression. Stage 1, dissatisfaction, internal resentment, financial stress, emotional withdrawal. Stage 2, fantasy escape, imagining a different life, a different identity. Stage 3, identity division, living two psychological realities at once. Stage 4, moral disengagement. The family is reframed as an obstacle rather than as loved individuals. Stage 5, catastrophic resolution. Violence is framed internally as a solution, not rage. Resolution, removal, reset. Chris Watts presented outwardly as reserved and compliant, yet beneath the surface, evidence suggests emotional withdrawal and identity crisis. Financial strain had occurred, marriage strain had developed, an extramarital relationship represented an alternative future. The psychological pattern aligned closely with identity collapse, followed by attempted reinvention. The existing life became incompatible with the desired one. Violence became, in distorted logic, a reset, an attempt at a clean slate. Scott Peterson's case presents a different psychological configuration. He maintained social confidence and external image, but deception and avoidance of fatherhood indicated conflict with impending identity change. Here, violence appears aligned with self-preservation. Eliminating the partner eliminated exposure. The motive reflects preservation of a preferred identity rather than escape from collapse. Preservation versus reinvention. Different pathways, similar outcome. How does empathy weaken? Psychologists describe a process called moral disengagement. Language shifts. Responsibility is minimized. Harm is reframed as necessary. The offender no longer sees themselves as violent. They see themselves as solving a problem. This cognitive shift allows outward calm to coexist with inward justification, which is why both Watts and Peterson were able to speak publicly in the aftermath. Compartmentalization shields the self from collapse. Family annihilators often show no prior violent history. They go to work, they maintain routines, they smile in photographs. Warning signs when present are subtle: emotional withdrawal, secrecy, increasing detachment. But these signs are common in many non-violent situations as well. Prediction remains extraordinarily difficult because the progression is internal, invisible. Control plays a central psychological role. When individuals perceive loss of control over identity, finances, reputation, or relationships, the need to restore control can become urgent. In extreme cases, violence is interpreted as regaining authorship over one's life story. If identity cannot be preserved and it cannot be escaped, it may be destroyed. Family annihilation forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, that identity can become fragile, that shame can distort reasoning, that attachment can be overridden by self-preservation. These cases are not simply about violence. They are about psychological collapse, about the moment when personal narrative becomes more important than human connection. Family annihilation is rare, but its existence challenges something fundamental. The belief that danger is always visible. The belief that collapse announces itself. Sometimes the fracture begins quietly, inside a role, inside a marriage, inside an identity that appears perfectly ordinary. Understanding these patterns does not excuse them, but it may help us recognize the warning signs of collapse before they become irreversible. The most disturbing truth may be this: the greatest transformations are often invisible until it's too late.